happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
I believe we're at episode 42, maybe 43 since January, so we're cranking these things out at a pretty good clip. I'm Dave Sierra-Lupe, sometimes known as Getch, and today we're going to talk about voting. Is there any point in it? You have Bush v. Gore back in 2000. I think that was a shock to most of us. That started to make us think that maybe we've lost control of our electoral process. Since then, Citizens United, the whole question about electronic voting, the current moves in several states to disenfranchise different voters in order to sway elections. It makes me wonder if we have any purpose going to the ballot box at all. Today we're going to discuss that. I've got with me today, I've got John Zerzan and Michael Carrigan. John is a anarchist writer, a proponent of the anarcho-primitivist movement, and has spent 10 years speaking around the world to spread the word of anarcho-primitivism. And Michael Carrigan is a community organizer with CALC, Community Alliance for Lane County, a longtime peace activist, stalwart of the Occupy Eugene movement, and campaign manager at the local level, I assume, right?
Yes.
Yes. So, for starters, I guess, Michael, would you like to just give people a sense of where you're coming from on this topic? Is there any point in voting?
I think there is. I have voted in every election since I was 18, and I have enjoyed doing that. I think it has made a difference. On the national level, for example, we have the Endangered Species Act, we have a Stop to Nuclear Testing, the Wilderness Act, which established the wilderness areas, which I love dearly, which I love to go backpacking in. And the state level, we have probably the strongest beach bill in the world, where the beaches are ours. We own them, and we can access them at any time. A bottle bill, in which we pay the 5 cents. Oregon led on that, is in other examples. And on the local level, also too, we have Kitty Pierce here as mayor, who has really pushed to make Eugene a leader in the country, a green city, where we do things that the rest of the world is proud of. And so I've been involved in the process, like I said, for a long time. But I acknowledge that voting or involved in campaigns is only one element of building a movement. I think the two of them have to go hand in hand, and that local organizing is the key. People got to be involved. We got to be pressuring, putting the heat on. Without that, it doesn't work. So that's what, as a community organizer, that is what I do. I work to get people involved, and the voting and elections is just one part of it. But I think it makes a difference. I think this country is a better place because of voting.
Okay, all right. And John, I know you're not coming from the same direction.
No, not in any way. And I'm kind of surprised to hear the rosy side of it, all this voting and the wonderful things, and yet things keep getting worse. And it strikes me that the people that are the most in favor of voting, I think, are relatively the most conservative, relatively speaking. Of course, voting is sanctioned and promoted by the powers that be for a reason. I mean, they're not. They don't want people to quit voting, and actually, there's some fear of delegitimating the system when the people participating drops. That's why there's more talk about mandatory voting, and that takes different forms. But a couple of comments, a couple of news things I just got this morning that I wanted to mention. One from the Exarchia neighborhood of Athens. I'm pretty certain this was last night, because it was at night, and today was an election in Greece. Late last night, a group of approximately 10 people entered a polling station in Exarchia, attacked the two cops there, and set the ballot box on fire. It is still undecided, unknown how this will affect the election announcement. And this morning from Al Jazeera, the voting in Egypt, great deal of disaffection, maybe less than 50% are voting. And I think that not voting is a political act, and that it's always portrayed as, well, you're just not doing anything, which kind of gives it away. That tells you that the voting thing is a substitute for something else, regardless of whether people say it isn't. Anyway, people not only didn't vote in large numbers today, evidently, but some people spoiled their ballots. Disenchanted Egyptians spoil their ballots is the name of this piece. One comment written on ballots was, "I want Hayatem," who is a favorite Egyptian belly dancer. Other comments, "The revolution continues, principles cannot be divided." Anyway, there are a lot of other things people can do. I would just point also to Wisconsin, the losing effort to recall Walker, the governor of... That was a year and a half's wasted time and effort, I think. That was just strictly recall was all you... Even from some anarchists got swept up into that. I was there in April, and that's just an example of just how it works in practice. You get people just put all their energy into that for what? Not only did they lose, but they could have been doing other things.
All right. Well, you know, Wisconsin might be a good place to start, because I believe you had indicated, Michael, that you might have a different view on Wisconsin. Do you want to share any of your opinion on that?
Of course, I was disappointed in the result that the recall didn't succeed. But organizing on the political level, people have to go door to door. They got to talk to the neighbors. They got to bring people in to talk what kind of change they're going to push for. So even though they lost, the tens and thousands and tens of thousands of people they got involved, those people are, I imagine, going to continue to work for the kind of change I think both John and I would support. We all would support. They're involved. They're getting things done. So even though I was very disappointed, I don't think it was a waste of time. As I said before, if that's the only thing people do, then I think that is not good enough. But I think that going door to door, being involved in the campaign means people, I think, will still be doing community work in the weeks and months ahead.
So you say it's not the only thing. Voting is not the only thing
Correct,
people should
yeah.
do, right? Is voting a pacifier then? Is voting, do we have the vote because when we have the vote, we are more likely to accept that that's all we need to do? Maybe voting, as John says, maintains the system by keeping us from challenging the system in any meaningful way.
That's not how it works for me. I can't deny some people vote, that's all they do. Yes, that does happen. But I don't think A necessarily leads, and that means they don't do anything. I encourage people, when they do vote, to remind them this is not enough. The next steps, if we're going to vote people in office, we have to hold them accountable. We have to put the pressure and heat on them where they will make the change that we are pushing for. So I think we need to keep reminding people in this community that it isn't enough just to do that. But I think it does, it's part of the process of making change in this country.
So the voting system is the lead tool for making change in this country?
No, I think it's, I wouldn't necessarily, for me it's not the lead change. I think it's getting, it's building a movement, getting people involved, and that involves, meeting with people, talking to them, and, working on the local issues. So I think that is, the movement building, I think is more important than actual voting itself. But
voting fits within a system that you feel is still still has the potential to meet our needs in addressing the issues that affect us on a day-to-day basis.
I think it does more on a local level. The lower you get down in toward the local level, the less influence money has. As we know, with the Citizens United, the influence of big money in national politics is just huge. And that's a playing field that's tough for us to actually succeed in. I mean, I will still vote. I will still vote in for the presidential election, but I'm not going to volunteer. I'm not going to put my time into it.
Right.
I think my time is better spent on the local level, either supporting ballot measures or candidates who I believe in, because we can get people involved to the level that can counteract the influence of money in the local campaign.
Okay. You sparked something I had to write down, so I wouldn't forget it later. So John, just at the system level, because I think that's really the basis of your critique, is that voting perpetuates a system that doesn't work. Is that?
Well, I don't want it to work, quite frankly. I want it to go away. I'm not interested in reforming it, perfecting it so it keeps its hold on people. People who just never quit voting, they never quit defending the system on a basic level. It's and progressives. I mean, I don't know if there are any people in Occupy that aren't progressives. That's my take.
Yeah,
and that means, okay, so that's a fundamental difference. I'm an anarchist. I'm not a liberal or a progressive. And I think progressive, correct me if I'm wrong here, means, I think the common idea there is that fundamentally the system is okay. It needs to be reformed, it needs to be changed a little bit here and there. Well, I don't accept that at all. This system, among other things, is a killing machine, and the liberal part of it is just as necessary as the conservative part. That's the way it works. It's absolutely an illusion to think that. And what kills me is I see Obama comes to mind, who in so many ways is worse than Bush. Who doesn't get that? And yet people are going to keep on voting for Obama, I'm sure, in the fall. And where's the accountability? There isn't any at all.
I should correct myself. They've been, anarchists involved in the Occupy movement as well. I didn't fully understand, progressive when you said it, so I just want to make sure I correct that. It's a real diverse, folks involved locally in the Occupy movement.
Okay, you know certainly more about it than I do. The anarchists I've talked to are not interested. Their militancy or radical stuff has been suppressed by the progressives, the liberals. Okay, that's why and of course that's a little tricky because so many people now are anarchists and they're not. I mean, that's fine. I'm fine if that's kind of an interesting thing itself, but. There were anarchists who voted for Obama. I mean, they're not anarchists, in my opinion. It's not for me to decide, but
now,
right.
Does voting take away a person's claim to to being an anarchist?
They'll take your card away.
That's right.
Well, no, I just think it's just kind of basic. It's just you don't want to reinforce, legitimate, and reproduce the system if you are opposed to the system. And voting does exactly that. I don't know, you probably wouldn't deny it because you're not interested in getting rid of the system, you're interested in reforming it. I mean, there's a gulf there. There's a giant gulf there.
I agree,
So we have, at the system level, you don't want to touch the system. You think the system is damaged but repairable.
Yeah.
Okay. Now,
well, I want to destroy it.
You want to destroy the system? Yes.
It's not hands off.
Okay. Now, just within the context of the system that we live in, I'm going to need to engage you at that level. Let's go over some of the reasons why people say that you need to vote within the system. And this may not work quite so well for you, John, so I'm going to try to lean it your way as much as I can. But people say you have to vote because at the presidential level because the next president is going to seat 2 or 3 members of the Supreme Court, and that the Supreme Court is going to affect how laws are determined and implemented. So is that reason enough to vote in a presidential election? Is that a compelling enough? Now you're willing to vote in the presidential election,
Yes.
Michael. But is it? Can you really feel that you're making a significant impact if you get, say, Obama in over Romney because Obama will place different people in the Supreme Court? Is that a compelling enough reason?
It's one of the compelling reasons for me, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I guess I needed more than a yes or no response.
Oh, no, okay. So, yeah, because issues, for example, Obama his administration just had an executive order yesterday giving, the Dream Act, on a local. And I think if the Supreme Court, Romney gets in, you'll see that executive order overturned in a hurry. I think too the example of we'll see what the vote on Obamacare is going to be. It's not sure which way that's going to go, but that gets overturned either now or later when more conservative justice. That'll have a real impact on people like me and others who don't, that really have a big, impact on people's lives. I can see it in the short term, and so also in terms of, I think, elections, and it'll just make it more and more of a conservative state where, we have less and less power. So to me, it is a compelling reason to vote. I think Obama's judges he has appointed so far are, judges I do respect. I think there'll be a big difference there between who Romney appoints and who Obama's going to appoint.
Okay. And John, so taking the same question to you, I want to insert some of my bias that when you look at Bush v. Gore in the Supreme Court, and that was a decision, when they wrote it, they said this is a one-off decision. No, this is not setting precedent, they said, when they placed Bush in the presidency. So that struck me as that, and then you get to Citizens United. Those two rulings from the Supreme Court struck me as really undermining what we can count on from the Supreme Court. Can we believe that our Supreme Court is unbiased and unbought? And so, taking that to you, is the Supreme Court enough of a stalwart for us to support, and especially through our votes?
Well, that is a cogent argument that's compelling to quite a few people. Oh, what happens if more right-wingers get into office or on the bench? But I think what it overlooks is it's not voting per se that changes anything. It's a reflection of what is. I mean, I think about, you name it, Roe v. Wade in the early 70s under Nixon. That was because there was a powerful women's movement, a radical women's movement at the time. It wasn't because people decided to vote on it. And I don't know if it ever is. You take marijuana legalization. I'm not very interested in that, frankly. If you want to smoke weed, do it. But where this changes is it's a function of how many people smoke pot. I was in San Francisco back in the day when the mayor came on the radio and said, no more bus for smoking pot. That was because there were thousands and thousands of people smoking pot. It wasn't because there was a vote on it. I mean, when you think about it, I think there's a confusion of cause and effect with the voting thing. Or I mean, and similar to that, I was in San Francisco and Berkeley in the 60s. Reagan was the governor, Nixon was the president, and it didn't mean a damn thing. It didn't stop the movement. It was irrelevant. So I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I'm going to behave if some worse pig gets in office than the pig that's in office now. The hell with that. That's the logic of the system.
Okay, and the logic of the system is flawed, and
well, keep voting. Stay with the system. Keep reinforcing it and pledging your faith in it and everything, and see what you get. See what we have got. I mean, it's incredible how bad things are, and not just quote politically, but just in the fabric of everyday life. You have people eating each other's faces. Crack wasn't bad enough. Now it's bath salts. You got these daily chronic shooting, these rampage shootings. You got the environmental catastrophe. I mean, it would be one thing, arguably anyway, if things were relatively healthy, things are not so bad, you're not going to get very many anarchists there in any way anyway if things are okay.
If the system's working, it's not producing anarchists.
Right, but it isn't working. It's incredible. And to want to make it work is the wrong conclusion, if you ask me.
So people are chewing each other's faces off, rampage killings, etc., is a sign that the system isn't working, and you feel that it's that level of dysfunction isn't going to be addressed by going to the ballot box.
Right, not at all. That's the stuff that's far more important than who's voting or who's in office or whatever. That's the fundamental stuff, in my opinion. That's why on my radio show I barely talk about political in that narrow sense of the word. What is the political culture, the social culture? It's just becoming pathological. It really is. And I've studied this, and I've paid pretty close attention since the 70s, and it's really freaking out. and to just keep on voting. I mean, that just doesn't seem appropriate to me.
All right. So at the local level, I stopped voting for quite a while, and it was Jello Biafra who, speaking at the U of O, who got me to vote again. Oddly enough, I stopped voting from the late '80s till the '90s, and he got up in front of a crowd and said, I stopped voting until I started realizing that local initiatives still have a chance to change our lives. And so he started voting again for local initiatives, and I followed his lead. And I take the local initiatives very seriously. I don't, most offices that somebody can hold, I don't take too seriously, because I figure that's where the corruption is easiest. So do you feel, I want to start with you this time, and I'll get back to you, Michael.
Okay.
At the is voting, I know that you think voting is gone from top to bottom, but at the local level, at the initiative level, where your vote can actually change your life, it can change, say, whether we're going to be funding more work on cleaning our wetlands, or whatever. At that level, where you can see a tangible change, is there any redeeming qualities for it?
Well, I think again, if it's not the voting that saves the wetlands or something else, generally speaking. I mean, it's my wife believes in voting on issues, doesn't vote for any persons or politicians, but we could raise the question of whether it's legitimate. Is it legitimate to put these things on the ballot? Just like, is it legitimate to have one person represent 300 or 400 million people? That's crazy in itself. But you could imagine, what if they put on the ballot, and of course this couldn't happen because for various reasons, but what if they put on the ballot, if you vote yes, there'll be a law saying that if a white person is walking along the sidewalk and a person of color comes along, the person of color has to get off the sidewalk. There'd be all kinds of people voting on that. And instead of saying, wait a minute, what the hell? And that's an outlandish example, of course, but...
and if a law like that passed, it would be stricken
by
the Supreme Court.
It's kind of a joke there, but that's not what gets the goods, as the Wobblies like to say, in my opinion.
Okay.
The vote per se
isn't what gets the goods. All right, now, Michael, I know that you work within the local structures.
I do.
The initiative structure. So it definitely is something that appeals to you.
Yeah, I mean, talking to people, about voting, but more about the issues is what appeals. I've been involved in ballot measure campaigns. I helped. There's one called the Clean Streams Initiative in the late '80s, which protected parts of Oregon streams, protect salmon and forests. Was involved in that. We won. Felt great. I mean, that was an issue. So I really believe in the ballot measures. It's a great way to go and reach people and to make change. But I still, like I say, I still believe in the voting. I think on the local level, we have a city council now where we have just barely have a progressive majority on the council. And so we've been involved with on the homeless issue. The camp was an example of the community, and the homeless communities coming together. Even though the camp was shut down, we're all very disappointed in that. From there came the mayor's task force on homelessness, came relationship building, people working together. Occupy was on it, elected officials, police, others, and out of that, I think is going to be some change is going to happen. I think we're going to, I think we're going to have a homeless village established, hopefully in the fall.
Right.
But we have been talking with the city councilors and the mayor and others to get the support to make that happen.
Now, nobody's going to vote on this homeless village, as best I can tell. There's no way we can get that on a ballot before it would be implemented. So what you're saying is voting is helping this homeless village because we were able to place the people with who are sensitive to those needs in the position to vote in favor of it.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And therefore that validates voting.
A key thing is relationship building. That's what I spend a lot of my time doing. In the voting, I did manage the city council campaign of Councilor Ortiz a couple of times. We're friends now. I probably volunteer for some of the other campaigns, the Kitty Piercy campaign, and I'll have Betty Taylor in her campaign. So it builds trust. It builds relationships with the elected officials. So once they're back in office, they remember that. They go, oh, these are people who are out there working with me. They helped me. We talked. Now we understand each other. So these relationships that then bear fruit down the road. So that's why I have voting, and helps build the kind of relationships that make, that can change the system, make it a system that's actually going to make a difference, and improve, the quality of our lives. I feel it works.
Okay, all right. You put down, what does not voting do when we're jotting down ideas. And I went to you first last time, but this is your topic, so I think I want to go to you first again, and then get you to reflect on that afterwards, Michael. So John, you wrote down May 1st, though, so you were responding to something that Michael was saying.
Oh, well, obliquely, it just occurred to me. Which should I talk about?
Well, I just wanted to know if you wanted to talk about that before you went off on before we talked about what not voting does.
Well, I think it's just a political statement. It's at least as much of an active statement than voting. And instead of pledging one's faith in the system, it's withdrawing that support, and instead of keeping it going with your vote. And it's just that simple. I mean, and I think I could mention something about May Day, because it struck me that the connection, if there is one really, between Occupy and the anarchists, I think it was interesting to note that, and I don't know how far afield we want to get on this, but there was a lot of action in the streets, black bloc, militancy, in the Northwest, for example, in Seattle, and to some degree Portland. And, well, I could say probably not so much on the part of voters, but be that as it may, that brought up the question, we talked about it, whether or not you said, well, the Occupy is putting the anarchists on the map, and I thought you could put it the other way around. It's the anarchists that have the juice, and whether they come to play or not, I mean, it varies a lot in different places. But I think that's, it's going to take, in my view, it's going to take property destruction, which I don't consider violence. Otherwise, we're not serious. We are not resisting. We're going along with all of the forms of death that this system deals out on every level and every sphere. And I think just to, if you think things are fine, then keep voting and hope that the liberal will do something for you. Look, this is a liberal college town. It's going to have the liberal stuff. That's no surprise. It's not a big thing. And I'm glad that there is. I'm glad that there's wetlands. I love to bike out there all the time and so forth. I care about these things, but I just think that it's going to take real action. It's going to take the action that didn't occur in the 60s, for example, about the Vietnam War, the war against Southeast Asia, 3 million dead. That's because we didn't have the guts to really do more than parade around in Golden Gate Park and so forth. They did not stop the war. Those demos stopped 3 years before the war stopped. So, I'm in favor of getting real, and not just thinking, oh, things must be fine, let's just keep voting.
And voting is going to keep us from getting real.
Yeah, it's a substitute. You're sticking with the system. You believe in the system on a basic level. I don't mean, that you subscribe to every particular, but what is society? What is the dominant order? How does it work? The voting doesn't get you there in terms of analysis or action, in my view.
Okay. Not voting, to you, Michael. Is there a benefit in holding your vote back?
I think I'm not going to be critical for someone for not voting. That's their statement. I respect John for that, and others who don't vote. I would, hopefully that they're involved in some other way.
How do you feel about voting third party candidates?
Great. I think if people want to do that, that's all power to them. I think third party stuff. I think really that would really help build this country, our movements, if we had strong third parties. So, I strongly support having third party. I hope the Green Party would become a real strong national party.
Do you hold Ralph Nader responsible for the presidency of George W. Bush?
No, I voted for him.
Yeah.
So I do not.
Okay. Would you have voted for him if you were in Florida?
I voted for him if I was in Florida. Probably not.
Yeah.
So.
So there is a limit in your mind for holding your vote back. Because in essence, if you're voting
Yeah.
for a third party, you're voting for a system change.
Yes.
And it's an all or nothing vote, as much as not voting.
I admit sometimes pragmatism does enter my thought process in terms of who I'm voting for, which party, whatever. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But it's case by case.
All right. I've been hearing a lot lately. When you vote for the lesser of two evils, you're still voting for evil.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that?
That's good. There's merit in that. So, I mean, there are probably, in terms of voting, I will, probably vote for Obama this fall, even though certain terms of war stuff and other issues, I've been very, disappointed in that. Certain good things get done. So, but I struggle with it.
Yeah.
I can't say here, oh yeah, that's the way, I'm really clear about that. I struggle with it. Maybe there is a possibility come then I will vote for the Green Party candidate. So it's discussions like this, that are going to help, challenge my thinking and help me, look at things. Just don't do the same thing over. Just go, really look deeply at that. That's why I appreciate your, doing this today.
Well, and you mentioned that would be a system change, a third party. I don't think so. It's just a third party politician. What would it? I'm not saying they have exactly the same platform, but that doesn't challenge the system. I don't think.
Well, when I say system change, I mean it changes the system. It doesn't destroy the system. Like right now, we have a two-party monopoly, and because we have a two-party monopoly, we in essence have no choice, because corporate money and lethargy within the or not activism to isolate the vote to just Democrats and Republicans by the Democrats and Republicans have made it so that there is no real discernible difference between the two parties. And so you have a choice between two, I think I've heard that the range of our political choices right now fits within the right of most countries. So we're not voting on any progressive sense. We're voting on a straight right-wing ticket, whether you're voting Democrat or Republican.
So, that's where I would disagree. At least I focus on Oregon. I tend to okay, what are we doing here? Like we have Senator Jeff Merkley is one of the most probably progressive people who's ever been in the U.S. Senate. He's like Senator Wayne Morris, who we had in the late 60s, who was the only one to vote against, the Vietnam War. So I think he is the exception to that. I think he is an exceptional person to have in office. He was giving the person from the, I forget which bank, the big bank who was testifying in Congress from
J.P. Morgan?
J.P. Morgan. He was the one senator to go after him. So I think I acknowledge you're right in most cases, but I think it's not in this case. So I think it's important to look at what we do here in Oregon. We do things differently here. I think people, are actually, we got good people running for office oftentimes. We got people who are doing real action, people who are involved. So, I think it's, we set an example, I think, to the world that community organizing, even some Democrats are pushing for real change.
Now, it's a fairly well-known statistic when people are asked how they feel about Congress. They feel that Congress is failing. But then they ask about their congressman, and they say, oh no, my congressman's doing great, but Congress is failing. Do you feel like that is reflective of what you're saying right now, that here in the Pacific Northwest, we can make the system work, even though in the long haul it's not working?
Right. I agree it's not working presently.
Yeah. Okay.
I think we're lucky to have, Peter DeFazio. I think most cases is good. There's some big differences on him, like his forest plan I really disagree with. But, someone I can sit down and talk with, and we have a lot in common.
Okay.
He is willing to take on the big banks, take on the economic system, which we both all know is terribly flawed, and is taking this country downhill. So he's a person that has been challenging that. So
all right.
And there are some other examples in the state as well.
I want to bring you back into the conversation, John, and the way to do that at this point, I think, is alternatives. I think one thing that we all at the table can agree, the system as it works right now isn't functioning. That we don't. The question I have is, here in Oregon we have mail-in votes, and my question is, how different is it when we send our ballots in? How different is that from kids sending their letters to Santa Claus? I mean,
perfect.
Does it change anything? So we can agree that the system doesn't seem to be working, and I want to throw this over to you, John. What would you see as an alternative?
I say it's the national system of saying it's not working. So let's make clear on that. Yeah.
All right.
Well, national or local, I mean, I think it's hard to evade the conclusion that when a politician or a party or what have you assumes authority, assumes power, they are then responsible for managing this system. And then they're going to be doing pretty much what all the rest of them do, with the minor differences are important to you, I guess, but they're not to me. In other words, look at the Green Party, just to, in Germany, it sold out, if you want to use that term, almost instantly, as soon as they had a little responsibility or power. That's what happens. I mean, you can stand up and make people feel good by your voice, Wayne Morris or whatever, but it doesn't change anything. It's just, that's part of the game. That's part of the racket. They let people have a little role, and that person's real liberal, and that's et cetera. But the machine grinds on, and they love it when people just stay there. What they're afraid of is when people do look for actual alternatives in all the various senses of the word, in terms of the culture, most basically. How are we going to grow up and reskill and reconnect with the earth instead of throwing around all these false bromides about sustainability and green this and green that? It's a bunch of lies. It's just a bunch of crap. Things are just going downhill in every major sense. Again, I'm glad that there's wetlands we're producing. Meanwhile, the whole planet is going under. So it's not responsible, in my view, to just try to just chip away a little bit on the local front. And I'm active on the local front. I've been, and by the way, I was active in the EAT campaign in 1999. I don't know if you remember that. Eugene, Anarchist for Tory?
Yeah, right.
That was delightful. That was so
that.
much fun. Right after Seattle, that was pretty heavy stuff.
That was great.
Yeah, and Tory was such a tool. He just didn't. He could have just laughed, and it would have been deflated, But he was he went nuts, And all these anarchists were just, And the program was that he's such a boob and he's such a pro-development moron that we have to elect Tory, because then everything will collapse. I mean, it was all a joke, of course. It was pretty fun.
Well done. I really enjoyed that.
That was my attitude about the original Bush, is that we would be here today if we'd just re-elected Bush. We'd be where we are today 20 years ago if we'd just re-elected Bush. But I want to pin you down still, though. If the system doesn't work, and if we still have to meet the needs of a large society, and voting doesn't work, what is an alternative? How can we meet our needs as a society if we don't have voting?
Yeah, and what you recommend folks can do, especially locally?
Well, I am interested in localization and autonomy, because what I'd like to see is undoing mass society, because it's become so toxic and scary. I mean, it's just really not working. In the stage of the technoculture, mass society is just really awful. I mean, count the ways. And we don't have time to get way off into that. But so, in other words, the responsibility for running a country of hundreds of millions of people is not what I want to do. In other words, what kind of world would it be that doesn't need running ultimately, to work in favor of that, in favor of autonomy and developing what we can do on our own, so that we can break away from the system and really create something different, instead of trying to patch this one up and keep going and with the bad results that we see. That's where the primitivist part comes in.
So ideally then, you would like to see us break our system down into local units that are more, I don't know how we're going to replace voting even at the local level, but I won't press you on that just yet, because I want to hear I mean, unless you want to approach it, you know,
Well,
how would we meet our needs?
I would say, well, I'm speaking of a goal. I mean, I hope it isn't utterly distant or unrealizable, but if you're working to pursue that sort of radical decentralization, then like band society in the Paleolithic worked pretty well for a couple of million years without any political parties or a hierarchy even, you know. And I was in the East Blair Housing Co-op here for 15 years in Eugene. And I'm not comparing it with band society, but everybody there was responsible and accountable because it was just 50 or 60 people, which happened to be about the number of band society. You pull something and there you are, and you have to be there with the others. And it was pretty cool learning experience for me. And I mean, in other words, I like to go all the way in that direction,
but we couldn't
just get rid of the rest of it.
We couldn't really break ourselves down into units of 60 people at a time. Do you think? I mean,
well, not right away.
Yeah.
Of course not. Yeah, that would be that's. And Noam Chomsky always says we're insane. 7 billion people would die. Well, of course it would if you just pulled the plug somehow. If somebody could do that or wanted to do that, which we don't. But this is really becoming so dangerous. This overextended, insane thing that's just with its hyper-globalization and the hyper-pollution and the whole thing is just way out of control. And we shouldn't pretend like it's okay. We just elect another liberal or something. That isn't even going to slow it down.
No,
it's not slowing it down, I don't think.
I agree.
I mean, that's where I'm coming from.
Okay. So, yeah, alternatives. How would you make the system work, Michael?
Well, the localization idea, I actually agree with John, and I think the more of that, the better, where people are involved locally and in making decisions that affect them here, like in the Whitaker neighborhood where we both live. I think strongly support that concept. But at the same time, there is government in place, and on the city level, I'm not willing to wait for that process to unfold where it works. In the meantime, people will die. It'd be just some, I think, terrible outcomes because of that. So I think we have a responsibility to utilize this, the structure we have right now to make the change to help, to serve people. I have a daughter in the 4J school, and I strongly support the schools. And she's getting a excellent schooling right now. It costs money. You got to pay teachers. There's a system in place. There's a school board. You vote to run that system. I'm not willing to, shut that down.
Well, if I could, mentioning the Whitaker, I think it was important to some of us, or instructive. In the late 90s, the city tried to close Scobert Park. The neighborhood stopped that. They tried to cut 35 of these old big leaf maples along Adams, you might remember, and the neighborhood, when the city said, this is not up for debate, the neighborhood basically said, just try it. And they knew they were going to have possibly a riot on their hands when they tried to bring in weed and seed, the federal thing.
I remember that, yeah.
And what was the other one I was thinking of? In other words, none of that had to do with voting, nor does gentrification, by the way. That's another non-voting thing. And I think it's hard to tell what would have happened in the alternative, because we don't know, but there was a very expensive restaurant, you might remember, before OUR, and there were some people fearing that the rents would go way up, people would discover, what a hip neighborhood. You never know what's going to happen, but that place was bricked, that place was spray painted, and they left. And I remember a column in the Denver Post, when I was doing a lot of childcare then, and the family had been in Denver, and there was a column by a liberal columnist referring to that in the Whitaker, these anarchists going nuts and everything, and damaging this restaurant building. And, this is horrible stuff. At the end of the column, the guy said, but after all, what are you going to do, vote? You don't vote on these things. These most important things are not subject to vote. The neighborhood really exerted some power, and I'm not sure that everyone agreed with all of this stuff that happened, and the anarchists there made mistakes too, but yet it's not the voting that changes it. It didn't matter the Tory was in office. It didn't matter. Those trees are still there now because people weren't going to stand by and wait to vote or something. And it wouldn't be on the ballot anyway.
Right. I think I totally agree. It's like community organized, the kind you're talking about, really is the way to make change. But I don't throw out voting as well. I think voting has a place, but we're in agreement on that.
Cool.
Okay, I want to just toss out a few ideas that have weakened my support for voting. Like, how about electronic voting? Diebold. I saw a article getting back to Wisconsin, where apparently a good chunk of the votes that were cast were electronic, and those ones were run. A huge percentage of those were controlled by like two guys in an office in a strip mall, which strikes me as a weakness in the system. Can we still rely on a system that has those kind of weaknesses built into it?
You know, for me, I can only speak, in the Oregon system, which I have faith and confidence in that system. I think we have checks and balances in it, and a system that works here. I admit some of the stuff happening in other states, really leads me to go question just, how fair that is. That there's some, so yeah, it raises questions in my mind. But like I said before, I tend to focus on what we do in this state of Oregon, where I think we have, a system that works. That's because a lot of people are involved putting pressure on it. And we have that kind of, I think, tradition of, when I use the word good government, but is that people are involved, people can be involved, and so I think it works here.
So in other words, and you've stated this already, I'm just restating, what you're saying is the system works the closer you are to it in the vote that you're casting.
Absolutely.
The further your vote gets away from you, the less it works for all of us.
Yeah, I agree, yeah.
Okay, all right. Yeah, and I would tend to think that when you're voting for a belief, when you're voting for an amendment, an initiative, you're more likely to be able to get more value for your vote. But when you're voting for an office, even at the e-web level, once money is involved in an office, I would tend to think that the office itself becomes compromised.
Depends on the amount of money. I think on the local elections, the city council, the e-web board, I just haven't seen that happen.
It just means that there's not enough money in it. I would tend to believe, but I don't know. John, is this a section of the debate that strikes you at all?
Well, the money thing, I guess I'm just kind of guessing, but I wonder how many ballot measures or whatever it might be have been won by the side that has the least amount of money.
I would like to know that too. I was thinking, as you get higher and higher up, the percentage of offices that you vote for, I think once you get to president, 100%. Congress, probably pretty close to 100% corrupt. You're not getting real access for your vote. That's my opinion. When you're talking about the initiative level, I'm wondering that's when you have a chance for money may or may not have the juice to carry it over the finish line.
Actually, Ron, I think that it's case by case, because certain ballot measures draw huge amounts of money, out-of-state money, that really just undermine the system, where the proponents really don't have a chance. Whereas some elected races, like I mentioned Jeff Merkley, the kind of money he raises, that's a race within, he has a chance because the money thing is about even. DeFazio, Art Robinson ran against some real right-wing guy. They were close on money, so that even the playing field. So ballot measures, I think, unfortunately, there's no limits on money coming in on ballot measures. So once again, it depends on the ballot measure, and proponents of ones we like, it's just how many people are involved, and also, quite frankly, how much money is raised.
Do you guys remember the vote to close Hanford? Or not Hanford, Trojan? Was it, am I thinking right? The one in St. Helens?
Yeah, Trojan.
Trojan.
Yeah,
do you remember that vote to close Trojan? How it was a grassroots write-in campaign, as I recall, funded by one guy who had a lot of money. And we got it on the ballot, and it was running pretty strong. And then I guess Trojan, the people who are running Trojan, said, "No, don't worry. We can run for 20 years. You don't have to worry." And the ballot measure said we're going to close Trojan, and any of the costs of closing Trojan are going to be carried by PG&E. And then PG&E came out and said, "No, don't worry. Trojan can run for 20 years without any trouble at all." They carried the election, and then that was in what was that, 92, I think? Maybe 90? And it was either 90 or 92, I don't, they carried the election, they didn't have to close Trojan, they didn't have to shift all the payments to PG&E, so that was November, and then in February they said, oh, it looks like Trojan's going to have to close down after all, and that $125 million is going to get carried by the taxpayers instead of PG&E. So it just struck me right away there as a weakness in the system. You know?
Yeah, but it was shut down because of that being on the ballot.
Well, okay, I suppose so.
I think, yeah. I mean, that kind of pressure. I mean,
and so then it was just a question of where did the money go?
Right.
Who you know, the money still
partial,
won.
right? Yeah,
the money
partial
still
victory.
Won. Yeah. Did you have something on that, John?
Well, I think you mentioned in passing, referred to this, the cynicism, the growing cynicism, and I think that makes it even harder to hold out hope for change through voting. I mean, you people are not paying attention because they don't believe in it. The whole thing is a joke. So, I mean, 6% believe in the whatever it is. I mean, you go down the list. What ruling institution has even a modicum of even a significant minority of support? Mm-hmm. So what kind of, that's the context, and of course they shouldn't have any belief in it. It should be zero. Mm-hmm. In my view. I mean, why would you have any faith in it? And I'm not saying everybody's thought about this a lot or has become an anarchist or something, but you can see the system is just out of gas. It really doesn't have answers, and people don't believe in it. Mm-hmm. And I bet this fall there will be way fewer people voting, and then there'll be, especially, insofar as people don't vote, then we get to question perhaps of delegitimation. Well, people that, in democracies, I think in general you can see in looking at various countries like in Europe, the ones that have had a lot of democracy believe in it the less. Mm-hmm. It's the new countries that didn't have democracy for a while they're going to be in favor.
Excited about it.
And then what?
Love.
I mean, then you don't. I mean, it's just it's a racket. Everybody knows that.
I remember for Clinton and Bush, I don't remember Bush W and Obama, they both won with like less than a quarter or right around a quarter of the eligible votes. So that's a problem right there, because the people who aren't voting. You end up, you can run a campaign now where you don't aim to achieve a majority vote. You aim to chase away a majority of the voters and win with a small fraction.
Not the case in this state. Oregon has voter turnout close to 70%, which I think it should be 90%, but you have a situation here where people still believe in it, still are involved, and that's why our system works better than most places.
And not only that, when we count our votes for president, pretty much the president has already been decided before we even finish voting. But that's a different issue entirely. And we didn't even touch on the Electoral College. I don't know if we have enough time to do that, where basically we're not voting for president. Maybe that's almost heading towards what you're thinking, John. It's a system where our vote is openly taken away from us. So we should, maybe that's moving us away from faith in the electoral system.
Well, the giant the decision to have unlimited corporate money, that if that doesn't, why would anyone have any faith left if it's just billions? There'll be billions of dollars spent on this, and that's all. And the news is threadbare enough. I mean, it's so thin, and it avoids anything important. And now, it's just becoming more of a scandal. I think that's right. It's going to drive people away even further. The system doesn't have the long-range intelligence to not do that. They would be wise to straighten it out, to reform it, keep people voting, keep people believing in it, insofar as they can. But they're not doing that.
So the system may actually force the outcome that you most...
it's helping, maybe like the EAT campaign.
Whereas I'm thinking the way to counteract that is mobilizing more people. Because I'm a community organizer is what I do. Okay, we'll get more people involved, we'll take the system back. Right, I agree, it's really, it's as bad as it's ever been right now.
Right.
But I'm not willing just to say, all right, I'm done.
But you don't have to be done. There's a million other things you can do.
I know.
And voting fronts that off. Voting prevents people. It does, like recycling does too. You can imagine that your little recycling is going to make any difference. It doesn't. It simply doesn't. but we're supposed to. But it gives us something to do, like voting. It's really almost entirely irrelevant. It's the well, that's a whole other topic, but that's not what is going to save the planet or anything. It's simply not.
We're not going to vote to save the planet.
I'm not.
Whereas on the issue of voting or recycling, of course, the back of my shirt, this is right. It says zero waste. To me, it means
Well, yeah, I recycle too. But let's face it. I mean, any part of it, the water, the energy, this is an industrial problem. And as long as industry is just fine, as it is for both parties and everybody else, then we're just going downhill. We have to, and that's what anarcho-primitivism. What about, do we want to just keep industrializing? Most of the left does. Chomsky does. It's insane. We can't keep doing that. Everybody knows, nobody disputes, let me put it that way, that global warming is a function of industrialism.
Yep, you're right.
But so the obvious thing is stop the industrialism. Well,
But all of our votes are uniformly either are uniformly pro-industrialism. It's just a question about how will we industrialize.
exactly. It's
People gotta
never
work
on the
jobs
ballot.
and-
Do you think industrial life is a good idea? Vote yes or no. No, you don't get to vote about that.
That's an interesting. His point. I was reading a Nation article before talking about it's about voting versus or organizing, but they're saying more jobs. We got to produce the industrial, and part of me is going is that kind of the localization that we need to be doing? But people. They need work, they got their kids, they got schools.
I know.
So
it's not a simple thing. It's no small thing to tackle.
Yeah. Well, we're not going to touch on economics. We did that with the gift
All
economy.
right. Well, back to voting. Okay.
Benjamin Crandall. No, I mean it's important. It's important. But we can't solve everything in an hour. So we're
Darn,
just
I was counting on that today.
We're just going to work on voting.
Right.
So we have Joe. Joe will not let me go over today. We got just a minute.
Oh, come on, Joe. Yeah.
How about 20 seconds? Closing thought.
I just resist the being a part of the system, and I'm not saying this to be uncivil to Joe, but he is a newly minted police commissioner, and I don't mean to be abusive here, but that really appalls me. That really disgusts me. You want to be the chief cop or one of the chief cops? I don't like cops. They put my friends in prison. The law is the code of the system, and the police enforce that, and to be a part of that is okay. I don't know if it seems all too typical, frankly, of Occupy.
I got to give Michael his shot now.
I think that voting does make a difference combined with the kind of community or organizing we need to do to make change. And I applaud Joe for joining the police commission. Hopefully, have an influence and make that the oversight of the police go better. So I think people involvement makes a difference.
All right. Well, very good. This has been yet another episode of Occupy TV. With me today, John Zerzan, Michael Carrigan, talking about voting. And thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you. Okay, we did it.
Ooh.
Something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we start